So good morning on this fine Saturday morning. A little chilly. What does that say? 51 degrees now, and that's already at a quarter after 10. The house was cold. I got to get the furnace going. So, Hockey Guy a few days ago came out with a video titled "Everyone Hates the Florida Panthers." now, I haven't watched the whole thing. I watched about 5 minutes of it, and then I was starting to get ready for a live stream and everything. It's 30 minutes long, so we're going to be here a while because I'm going to watch the whole thing. I'll react to what I feel I should react to or would like to react to. I love the Hockey Guy. I'm sure he's done a masterful job with this. But the title, what's interesting about the title is the day before, and I am in no way, shape, or form alluding to him copying me. But the day before he put out this video, I put out a video that was similar in the subject matter that said hate sells in today's NHL. And so, yeah, when I saw this one come out, I wanted to give it a couple of days because I didn't want to take views away from him because I'm going to play the whole thing. So, all right, we're going to play it. And then I'll just pause it and chirp in when I feel this is gonna be good. This is gonna be good.
Welcome back. All right. It's a busy night tonight in the National Hockey League, but this afternoon I want to keep you busy talking about the Florida Panthers. So Florida, of course, is in the spotlight for two reasons. One, the Stanley Cup Championship team. Two, right now is the ongoing feud, the one-upsmanship between themselves and Tampa, which that all feels like it's part of the code. And I've talked about the code before and how I don't necessarily agree with the code. I don't like the idea that, well, you hurt this player, so in the next game they'll hurt this player. Because eventually it just, how crazy does that go? When does the retribution stop? And then I've seen people talking about Department of Player Safety. I think part of it is that for the Florida Panthers, they are a team that's won back-to-back Stanley Cups. They're going to be very visible. Everybody's going to watch what went on. I think that makes a big difference that their games are being played on the big stage. Everybody's watching as opposed to during the regular season where there's some dirty players that people may not be as aware of the fact that they could be dirty players.
Real quick, full disclosure, full honesty. Um, Regardless of what you might think about what went down in these two preseasons, me, myself, and I would have considered the matter on Hagel closed. I thought, the Hagel Barkov thing and then the Ekblad. I thought we were done. I thought we were done. But apparently, we/they were not.
But I wanted to talk about some theories. I wanted to start off with the whole Gregory Campbell thing because I keep seeing it in the comments. And not just here, I see it everywhere. So Gregory Campbell is the son of Colin Campbell. He is the assistant general manager of the Florida Panthers. And if you read the internet enough, you would start thinking, so the only reason the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup in 2024 and 2025 is because Gregory Campbell's their assistant GM and his dad called in a few favors to make sure Florida wins the Stanley Cup. This is a great theory if you want to make sure that your team isn't held responsible for losing a series against Florida or losing games against Florida. The Florida Panthers are a juggernaut right now, but they certainly were not. And yep, they hired Gregory as the assistant GM in 2023 because it's not because he's good at his job, which I mean I've seen that reports he's good at his job, but anyways, it's not because he's good at his job. It's just they knew that was the secret formula to get them back-to-back Stanley Cups. I don't know how they got to the Stanley Cup final in 2023 because Gregory Campbell wasn't assistant GM at that point, but it's fine. It's a conspiracy theory. It doesn't need a whole lot to hold it up. Now, Colin Campbell, his history, there's definitely some reason to furrow your brow at the name Colin Campbell, and I get that. November 15th of 2010, there was a report by TSN which exposed emails from Colin Campbell which were basically complaining about officiating, that his son was getting penalties he didn't feel he should be getting. And so he would email Stephen Walkham, the head of the officiating there, and I never...
I want to pause it here because there's something that doesn't get spoken about in a grander scheme whenever anybody's emails are leaked. Why did them? who leaked them and what was the reason. And what I'm getting to there is that those were the emails that were leaked. Are we so sure that Colin Campbell was the only one in the NHL whoever fired off an email complaining about officiating, or was he the one that got stabbed in the back and had his emails leaked? And you could extrapolate that to any subject matter that you want. It's like when somebody's emails get leaked, like the Gruden situation. Okay, just because it can be true that the emails are inappropriate and shouldn't be sent. That part can be true, while at the same time, you do have to ask the question, well, who leaked them? Why did they leak them? And why does nobody else's emails ever get leaked? I mean, I'm sure Gruden and Campbell are not the only two schmucks that have said stupid stuff over email. I just wonder who they pissed off.
I haven't seen anything from that. Now, here's the thing. I've never seen anything where it's shown that that's meant preferential treatment for Gregory Campbell, either as a player or now as an assistant general manager. I haven't seen that. Now, people will say, well, hey, the fact that Florida doesn't get suspended, which when I pointed out Florida has been suspended over the last few years, I've been told those ones aren't important. They didn't suspend the ones they should have before this. And then I've seen too, oh, Florida does this every single game, which they don't. I actually watched that game closely between them and Chicago, looking for anything, and there wasn't anything there. Now, we'll discuss, we'll get into that. Now, the whole Colin Campbell argument for me, I'm not going to make it because there's absolutely nothing saying that Colin Campbell has done anything to ensure that Florida has any level of success.
Honestly, the whole Colin Campbell, and I try not to insult anybody because I'm sure there's somebody that might watch this video. But if you genuinely feel, if you have analyzed the situation objectively and actually have arrived to the conclusion that the Panthers are winning because of anything to do with any of the Campbells, turn in your driver's license, your voter registration card, because you should not be given the ability to make decisions that affect other people, because it's just there's nothing there. It's an imaginary it's imaginary fantasy land wrapped in a Willy Wonka candy bar.
Left his place in Department of Player Safety before the 2011 Cup Final, and boy, did Canuck fans have some opinions about that. That Boston destroyed Vancouver in that series. I know it went the full 7, but when Boston won, those games were not close. So it was Colin Campbell's fault the Canucks did not show up for games 3, 4, or 6. It was Colin Campbell's fault. And this is where it becomes, to me, it's more in the excuse territory. It is the my team lost. I cannot admit that my team wasn't better than the other team. Therefore, the other team, there must have been some shenanigans involved. And then it makes it easier to deal with a loss. I try not to do that. Certainly when I was younger, I was much more prone to it. So in my late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, sure, I might have said, hey, that guy's a dirty player, yada, yada. Sure. But this is my 9th year now covering it on the channel and having watched how fans talk. And then reflecting back on me, things I've said over the years, and I realized, I think I had that wrong. And I think I had that wrong often. So that's why I try not to post videos when I'm upset. I try not to post videos if I'm PO'd about a result, PO'd about a play. I try not to post the videos until I've settled myself down. There are definitely times where I feel like that's not fair, that shouldn't have happened. But I'm not going to bring it into a video because I know it's a subjective opinion. It's not objective. There's no facts necessarily behind it. And with Colin Campbell, I'm not saying he's a great person. I'm not going to say that. There are definitely instances where I would say it might have been able to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. I was surprised when he got named to the Hall of Fame in 2024 as much as anybody, but I don't see that big conspiracy that just because they have an assistant general manager related to Colin Campbell, that's why Florida was one of the most dominant teams I've watched in the 2025 playoffs. Numerous times during the 2025 playoffs, I talked about just the dominance the Panthers had. And they lost that dominance a bit in that series against Toronto. I honestly thought Toronto was going to knock them off, and then Florida just figured it out. Against Edmonton, it looked like Edmonton could take them out, and then they figured it out. They won that game in overtime. Marchand got the goal, and from there going forward, it was pretty much Florida's series. Battle of Florida on the brain. But yeah, I don't put a lot of stock into it, and it's the biggest excuse I think of the excuses when it comes to talking about the Florida Panthers. I find that odd. So if Gregory Campbell quit in Florida and if he decided to take an assistant job in Vancouver, does that mean that if he was the assistant GM in Vancouver, they automatically win the Stanley Cup? No, because that's just not how things work. So the lack of judgment shown by Colin Campbell at times, I don't punish Gregory Campbell for the sins of the father. That's how I view it. Now, not all dirty plays mean a fine or suspension is incoming, and this is an every night thing. So, with there being 14 games tonight, there will be numerous incidents out of these 14 games that fans want fines, they want suspensions, they want revenge in the next game. There will be numerous plays where they say that goal shouldn't have counted. This wasn't goalie interference. This was goalie interference.
And the big secret is, and I mean, at a level we all know this deep down inside, those fines don't mean anything. Maybe if it's some minimum wage kid, some 775 player getting fined a few times, it might be a little bit of a ding in his pocketbook. But you think you think McDavid cares if he gets fined $2,000 or something? So the fans clawing and screaming for fines and suspensions like some random one game suspension, game 12 of the NHL season. You're just looking for blood. You're angry, you're frustrated, something happened you didn't like, and I get it. I absolutely get it. But it don't change anything. It's not going to fix anything. Nobody, none of these players are changing their behaviors over the fines, and only if you were throwing out really large suspensions, which the Player Association is never going to allow. These things need to be settled on the ice. And you either get refs that are going to settle it during a game and eject everybody on the ice, or if the refs don't handle it, then the players on the ice will. And that's generally that's how the justice is meted out.
What's like there's going to be those numerous conversations. It's there's too many games for it not to be a conversation. But not every dirty hit ends up being a suspension. There are the ones where you get five in a game, and Department of Player Safety looks at the play and goes, five in a game is fair. We don't feel that there's a need for further discussion. Now, I do think Department of Player Safety could talk more to the public. I think they've been trying to the last couple of years. They've been willing to talk to GMs. They've been willing to talk to owners as well. I think
This is a big thing that I agree upon, and I'll expand upon it. I've said this for years. Now he's talking about Department of Player Safety. I think the refs. I think the refs should be accountable, and DOPS. I think they should have to come out and explain why they've made decisions that they've made. I think that if they want to calm any kind of a situation down, you're going to need whoever send up there, get somebody who's good in front of people, and have them explain. Look, this is. I mean, use a highlight of the play in question, right? This is what I thought. I didn't think Uyghur meant to hit him into the boards. I thought he just kind of hit him shoulder to shoulder, and Pedersen hit a toe pick. So when we looked at that, we said, well, we didn't think Uyghur deserved a fine or anything like that. It's a hypothetical example, but you get my point. And the same thing I've said for the refs, um, especially now with betting, especially now with gambling. It's at some point going to become imperative that you have the player press conference, you have the coach press conference, and then you're going to have the refs, and they're going to need to answer questions. I think at some point, the way things are going, some level of accountability for both, like DPOS and the referees is going to need to come into.
that's a good start. Um, I definitely think Department of Player Safety could do more. There's definitely more there. I think that they could do to help people out. There have been times where they've posted videos saying this is the standard and this is what we're and they have to keep it. Now where I just kind of tune out at least a little bit is when the conversation becomes kick this player out of the NHL. I don't think there's anybody in the National Hockey League that has ever done anything to warrant kicking them out of the league. And in order to do so, the NHLPA would fight that immediately. That player would be reinstated at some point, and the league would probably lose any challenge for that on legal grounds.
Honestly, the only play that I ever think warranted somebody getting tossed out of the league was Uyghur behind the net with 2.3 seconds left against Tampa.
Too. So you'd have to be able to show that you're taking them out of the league for something that violates their contract, and a cross check wouldn't necessarily violate a contract. Sucker punch will not violate their contract. So when I see kick so and so out of the league, I don't have a response to that because it's not going to happen. It's a non-starter. The Panthers excel in physical games. I think this is where people are like, oh, we should give the Florida Panthers some of their own medicine. That's playing into their hands. I've talked about this for years.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you. I've talked about this with Boston, and I talked about it, I think, yesterday or the day before in the stream about Tampa. So that they're going to give the Panthers a piece of their same medicine. Exactly. He's calling it exactly. That's what they want. That's what happened with Boston. We would irritate the piss out of them. They would take the bait, get their mind off the hockey game, and maybe they beat the crap out of us physically over here in the corner or over there. But the score is 5-2 Panthers. So what he's saying, we've been saying that here for years, is like, if y'all think you're gonna out physical us, your brain is out of the game. Because for Florida, that's the DNA. The Panthers don't have to think about it. It's just what they do. So their brain is on the game, and that's just naturally how they play the game. If another team's going to come in and we're going to try to give Florida a piece of their medicine, well, their head's not in the game because it's not their natural way of playing. It only works if that's what your system is and what your natural way is. Otherwise, you can come in for a game and knock us around here or there. Maybe the middle of the season, I can't tell you how many times middle of the year last year, especially, teams would want to come in and they want to show us who's boss. And you could literally see our guys on the ice just being like, whatever, bro, it's February. What are you talking about? We didn't care. So it's only going to work if somebody can get to a point where they can naturally play their system the way the Panthers do, and then out physical them while also keeping their head in the actual hockey game in a 7-game playoff series. That's when somebody's able to eventually do that, that's when the Panthers will lose.
If your team, your favorite hockey team, whoever they are, decide they're going to go out and just punch every Florida Panther in the head, Florida accepts that challenge. Florida is fine with that challenge. Florida will then see that and raise you punches right back. The Florida Panthers can play any style of hockey. They're not scared of a physical game. They're not scared of fighting. Most of these guys on this team are not scared of fighting. And we'll come back to that because I think it does highlight a conflict with hockey fans that I see that I do want to talk a little bit about. So they excel in the physical games, and I think they adapt to the opposition. If they're playing against a team that's high-flying, they can play that way. If they're playing against a team that just chokes the game off down the middle and plays a boring style of game, all right, Florida can play that way if they need to win the game. They will.
And y'all Tampa Bay Lightning fans have the Lightning to thank for that, because you can go back on this channel. It's the 10th season for those of you who are. And I said consistently when Tampa was winning cups, they could beat you either way. You want to do run and gun, they'll beat you. You want to get defensive and physical, they'll beat you. Now, of course, the key component there is Vasilevsky and Bobrovsky. You got to have goalies that when it breaks down, they're going to make that save, 0.92% of the time, right? But the Panthers built the team to beat the Lightning. And now it's a little bit different, but exactly what he's saying here is true. The Panthers can do it. The Lightning could do it. They could beat you either way. Didn't matter how you want to play. The Lightning would just adapt to their opponent's style and beat them either which way.
Will adapt to the other team. Now, the whole tax thing is always going to be part of the reason people hate the Florida Panthers. Like I said, I'm trying to incorporate everything here, but I've said this during this summer, and I've said it before. The no taxes involve Florida, Tampa, Dallas, Nashville, Vegas, and Seattle. Florida's got a couple Stanley Cups, yes. Tampa Bay won in 2020 and 2021, but was it the no tax or was it the fact they were using LTIR? Because if they needed to use LTIR, then the no tax thing didn't help them because they didn't have a cap compliant team. This is where things kind of fall apart quickly, right? And so that's where. So did they?
My final assessment on the tax thing is that if you want to say that the taxes had an effect in Florida being assigned everybody on top of all of the players, I mean, Gustav Forsling taking less than $6 million, people. Okay. You know what? Forsling could have got on the open market. But if you want to say that the taxes played a role in us keeping everybody, I'm not going to argue. However, that said, we didn't acquire any of these players by paying them less to come here as free agents. We overpaid for Bobrovsky, the one big free agent we really had to go get. We overpaid at the time. Everybody was like, "Oh my God, $10 million," because the team sucked, and it wasn't completely suck at that point, but the franchise had been bad for so long. We knew as fans we had to overpay to get a guy like Bobrovsky to be willing to come here. So the whole tax thing ain't got nothing to do with how we won the cups. Now, if we win Cup 3, 4, 5, and people want to blame in part the taxes because we were able to keep everybody, you still have to have players that are willing to take millions of dollars less than they would have got on the open market. Bennett, Ekblad, Forsling, Reinhart, for freaking hell, Kaprizov just got $17 million. Okay? Reinhart and Verhaeghe combined are barely over that. So it's way more than just taxes here at play. But I'm tired of arguing with people about that one.
Need the taxes or not need? Because if they didn't, then what's with the LTIR? Those two things seem to conflict. Dallas hasn't won squat. They've lost against Edmonton in back-to-back years. So Dallas has not got over the hump. Nashville's never really been a consistent contender. They get to the final in 2017. They win a President's Trophy in 2018. And then there was the slow drop until they missed the playoffs. They made the playoffs surprisingly in 2024. They missed the playoffs in 2025. Barry Trotz spent his money in the summer of 2024. And there was discussions about what a deal it was getting Marchessault as well as Stamkos on the cap hits they got. However, the performance on the ice didn't match. So even if you want to make the argument that Bill Zito has this huge advantage as GM, he still has to know where to spend his money and on who. We're watching as GMs around the NHL are spending their money for next year, and where they're spending it and on who may not make a lot of sense. So when people just want to go to the tax thing and say, well, that's why Florida's really good is the taxes. Cool. What about all the GMs before Zito that weren't able to put together a championship team? There have been some good general managers in Florida, but they did not put a championship team on the ice. And Zito's made all the right moves since then. So the tax thing is, let's get to LTIR. Because the loophole's been closed. But what happened? Petrangelo's put on, and I know this is Vegas, but it's related. Petrangelo's put on LTIR, won't play the entire season, so they can write off the entire amount. He is guaranteed not to come back for the playoffs. And immediately I start seeing comments of, well, Vegas planned for that so they could go over the cap. This is still circumvention. So people who want to say that now, the LTIR loophole wasn't the problem. They just don't like the no tax teams. They just don't like certain teams. There were no complaints about the Montreal Canadiens having $10.5 million for Carey Price on LTIR the whole season. And people are going to say, well, we knew he wasn't coming back. But still, if LTIR is this huge problem, then shouldn't it be that people get mad at it for every team? But the idea that a team would plan to not have a top four defenseman is just bonkers. But it is what it is. And the Panthers did not do that with Sasha Barkov. The Panthers did not say, "Oh, he won't come back for the regular season of the playoffs." So they are playing short, and they've got that $10 million. There's some cap relief there by putting him on LTIR, but it is not as much cap relief as it was years back. And so they can't use the LTIR loophole, which they used this last season for all of the complaints. It is weird because Seth Jones, if they were doing a playoff salary cap, Seth Jones would have put him over the cap. Pretty sure that would have put him over the cap, which means that they would have been over the cap, although it's a no tax state. Basically, the teams that are looking for that competitive advantage are the ones that people get mad at. And I think the teams looking for a competitive advantage, if they can find it within the collective bargaining agreement and do it in a way that the NHL doesn't get mad about it, I can't get mad at those teams. I can get upset with the league about certain things, but I don't get mad at a team for taking advantage of a system that works for them. So, looking at their current roster, and I wanted to put asterisks next to players that have been called dirty over the last few weeks or just in general. So you got Barkov. I haven't seen him called a dirty player. I've seen people complain about him staying down when he got hit there in the playoffs with the hit that got, I think, what was it, Hagel, and Hagel ends up getting suspended. Yeah, it hurt. Like, I always find it weird. People are like, yeah, but if you stayed down there. Yeah, I don't know. Let that NHL player hit you like that and see how long you stay. Apparently, you just jump right back up. Bennett, I will agree. Bennett is on that line. And is he a dirty player at times? Yes. But when I see people talk about like Stolars, I didn't see enough there to tell me he should be suspended. And what I found interesting with the Stolars thing in the playoffs last year was people got angrier and angrier every day. So on the night that happened, people were upset. But then, like, a couple weeks later, felt like people were talking about it more. And they're like, well, look what he did to Stolars, and he's just a monster. And it's like, okay, so this hate just gets bigger every time people talk to each other and they get that feedback. And that feedback's confirming what they believe, then they just get angrier and angrier, right?
The Bennett thing, I've said this before. You can people define words differently. You want to call somebody dirty, that might mean different to the person saying it than it does to us. Bennett plays right on the line and he plays right in front of the net. So inevitably, invariably, there's going to be plays where he does things that cross the line because he's attempting to play on the line and he's playing right in front of the net. Now, I know for the teams that have been being beaten by the Panthers or have not had the success by the Panthers, that's a major annoyance. But what I can guarantee you is every single one of you would have my attitude if he was on your team. It's just the way sports have always worked and always will.
Boquist not dirty. Gadjevich, I didn't put an asterisk next to, but we know Gadjevich can drop the gloves. There may
Not dirty, but don't pick a fight with that man. Do not do not pick a fight. If you pick a fight with Jonah Gadjevich, head examined.
be somebody out there remembers something Gadjevich has done to qualify him as dirty. I don't know of any. Greer is a fourth liner. He's willing to drop the gloves if you want him to. Doesn't mean to do it every time. I always find it funny when I say a guy's willing to drop the gloves. People go, actually, he didn't drop the gloves last week. He was in a game. He was challenged to a fight. And he totally skated away like a loser. It's like, okay, so they don't accept every single fight. Doesn't mean they don't fight. But yeah, Greer, fourth liner. I think it's interesting how Florida picks up guys that have been around the league like Greer has, and they make it work. They make these players work in their system. I still don't think if he had been suspended before that game between Tampa and Florida, I don't think we see any less penalty minutes in that game. I think the emotions are up so high every time these teams play against each other. It reminds me of the old battles between Montreal and Quebec, the old battles between Montreal and Florida. Montreal was involved in a lot of them. The Battle of Alberta was quite literally a battle some nights.
Panthers in Florida or Panthers and Lightning. It has gone past any explainable, like when people are trying to figure because of this, because of that, because of this. and they're trying to use to be rational and use logic. And that situation has long since passed any rational thought or logical thought. Um, you can use any of the long term Middle East wars that have been going on for thousands of years, in the sense of, it's like, who knows when it started? It doesn't matter. They hate each other. Like, these two teams hate each other, and I'm not just talking about on the ice. I think on a personal level. Okay, I think they hate each other. I think there's genuine hate between the players on these two teams. Tampa had it. Florida has it. Tampa's trying to get it back before their window closes and they get too old. And Florida's the ones with it in their hand. So to try to nitpick and be like, well, was because of this, and this was because of that, and this one, you're just pissing in the wind, because they just hate each other, and they're gonna do stupid shit every time they're on the ice. And sometimes it's going to be the Panthers doing stupid shit, and sometimes it'll be the Lightning doing stupid shit. And if the Lightning do stupid shit, the next game the Panthers are going to do stupid shit to get back at the stupid shit the Lightning did the previous game. And it's just going to go around and around and around and around until and unless Colin or Gregory Campbell send an email, and then it'll be stopped by Bettman for sure.
There were definitely nights in the National Hockey League back in the 80s and the 90s where, yeah, almost everybody was off the benches. There were dirty hits being thrown right, left, center. You're going to get bench clearing brawls, not in the 90s, but in the early 80s. Just bonkers. And I remember that hockey. So when I watch hockey now, I still remember that hockey, and I think it's questionable, it's borderline, but I still remember how bad things were. Gregor, I don't think Gregor's been accused of being dirty. Cunnin, these guys haven't been with Florida long enough to get that. Lindell, I don't think Lindell's been accused of being dirty. Luostarinen, and I'm doing this too because
You get a lot of people accusing him of flopping, of going down a little bit too hard sometimes, and flopping around. Eh, Gamesmanship. I ain't gonna complain about that. And there should be no Tampa Bay Lightning fans complaining about Lundell flopping, because he probably learned it from watching Kucherov.
some of the comments I've seen are that every member of the Florida Panthers plays the same way and they should all be kicked out of the NHL, which is dramatic. I think if the NHL came out tomorrow and said, we're going to contract the league, we're going to get rid of the Florida Panthers because NHL fans think they're a dirty team, so we're just going to get that team out of there. I don't know that that's the right way to go, because the next thing that's going to happen is every other team's going to get off that radar. Before you know it, you wouldn't have a team left. Yeah, Luostarinen. I don't think there's been anything with Luostarinen. Marchand, all I have to say is the name. Obviously, Marchand has an asterisk. There's definitely been some plays over his career. Reinhart, I don't think there's been anything with Reinhart. Rodriguez, I don't think there has been. Samoskevich, far too young to have an asterisk next to his name at this point. Schwint just got back, so no asterisk there. Verhaeghe and Tkachuk, both of them, there's been accusations. Verhaeghe, of course, very recently. And Tkachuk, it just feels like there's a reputation thing, as well as, there's the occasional incident here and there. But I don't see two-handed stick swing violence as much. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not trying to excuse dirty plays. And I think where people get caught up is that Department of Player Safety is definitely inconsistent. Very inconsistent. I'll go through the defensemen and the goaltenders, and we'll discuss that. So
and that's to my point, and what he's saying too. They need a representative. The NHL, which they'll never do because they've got bone in the entire show. Give us a representative that comes out, and there was 4 hearings yesterday, or there were 4 plays that we looked at, whatever. And here's the play, and we're going to show it to you, and we're going to tell you what we saw and why we didn't make a decision, and at least give people something to argue about that the league is using as a reasoning for lack of suspension or fines, or for suspension or fine. At least give the fans something to sink their teeth into, to say, well, do you think the league was right or the league was wrong, as opposed to just fans just having to guess as to why the discipline is so inconsistent. That is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed.
Guess Bjornfoot, I don't think anybody's talked about them being dirty. People talk about Ekblad. I think my favorite one now is now everybody says Ekblad was on steroids. No. And I'm saying everybody, obviously not meaning absolutely everybody, but the comment I've started seeing is he was on steroids. No, he wasn't. Nope. Nope. No. No. But he's a Panther, so all right. But yeah, and he got a long suspension there as well. So that's weird because the NHL favors them, but they suspended Ekblad multiple times in the last 12 months. Forsling, I don't understand anything about Forsling being dirty. Jones, closest I could come is Chicago fans thinking he was lazy last year before the trade. Kulikov, Mikula, Petrie, I don't think there's much with them either. And obviously in that, Bobrovsky's not a dirty goaltender. Tarasov just arrived. So there's definitely some just arriveds here that maybe during the season we'll see fans get mad at him, but nothing as of yet. So we'll come over to this after this, and then I promise we're done. And like I said, this puts a bow on it. Won't have to discuss it again. Should there be automatic suspensions? I have for years said yes. Certain plays, certain incidents, at certain times, it should be automatic, and there should be a standard. And I think that would go a long way. So basically, this play happens, we know that's a suspension, and it.
Yeah, I can't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Um, that sounds a little bit too much like what the NFL with like certain taunting things. I don't think anything should just be automatic black and white. I mean, I guess if you're talking about something as simple as taking two hands, grabbing your stick and whacking somebody in the head on purpose, okay, but they're going to get suspended anyway. Um, I don't agree with automatic suspensions because it's still so subjective, and we still don't have any communication from the league mostly about what their reasonings are or are not for giving out punishments.
Should be dictated by the 5 minutes, 5 minute, 5 in a game a player gets that you would know a suspension's coming as well after that. Obviously, the NHL would have to work with the NHLPA on this. They'd have to work with Department of Player Safety. And I will say a complete revamp of Department of Player Safety, I don't think is the worst idea in the world. I am not saying Department of Player Safety gets things right every time, because they don't. I also think that the idea that there's some kind of cabal that's deciding all this and certain teams won't get, I can't get there. And I can't get there because it does evolve. I know people were like, well, he's talking about these other teams, but what's he talking about? Because 6 years ago, nobody was complaining about the Panthers and were complaining about other teams being dirty. When I said I don't remember people saying the Blues were dirty in the 2019 Stanley Cup run. Now there's a whole bunch of comments saying the Blues were terrible. They were really dirty during that Stanley Cup run. Those were terrible plays.
I said this at the beginning of last year. There's probably a separate video on this channel about this. Champions get every sport. Doesn't matter until the champion loses. For the most part, the champion is going to get the call. You notice how now the Chiefs, now that they lost the Super Bowl, all of a sudden now the refs aren't their best friends anymore. Now, some people might say, are they champs because they're getting the calls? Or are they getting the calls because they're the champs? I think they're getting the calls because they're the champs. And I'm not just talking about with the Panthers that way. I think it's there's a merging, right, that happens for years. We'd sit here on the couch 2012, 2013, 14, and just yell and scream at all the calls that the Panthers were not getting and the ones that would go against us. You know, we could, and they look like the exact same play. It's like, wait, that's not tripping, but that is. So there's no way to get around. The better teams and the better players are going to get the benefit of the doubt. You're not going to legislate that out of any of the sports. That's not going to happen. So some of the idea here with the officials and everything else is that it's still humans. There's still a human element there to it.
Always that perception that a team is dirty when they go to the Stanley Cup. I think part of it is that what we've seen with Tampa and now with Florida is teams that have gone to multiple Stanley Cups in a row. And so it means that fans get tired of them. Fans don't want to see them in the final again. And then it's going to be, well, they're only there because the league wants them there. That's the only reason they're there, which comes back to that idea that my team is infallible. My team can't have lost fairly. It has to be something the league did. It has to be something dirty those guys did. It's that play that happened in Game 3. Once that was allowed, everything fell apart. Now, I do think that if the officials talk to the press on some level, I think that could help. But I think we'd get a lot of no comment. I think we'd also get a lot of, I didn't see that play, I can't comment on it. I think that would happen. Referees are fallible, they're human, and I'm old enough to remember, being an old man, when there was one referee on the ice, there was always stuff happening behind the scenes. There were always sucker punches, high sticks, cross checks. There was always stuff going on behind because they know where the referee was looking. It's just the one referee.
And that extends to cameras as well. Okay? The officiating in any of these sports, a lot of times, it's not necessarily the officiating has gotten any different or any worse. Is that we see it all. There's a million camera angles. And I mean, you can have a play in football or hockey that's a questionable play. And in less than a minute, somebody has it on Twitter in slow motion and close up for everybody in the world to see with different angles. And it's a lot of information, and not everybody knows what they're looking at every time. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And I think a lot of the conflicts and arguments come from there's an entire segment of the population that doesn't know how to say the words, I don't know, I'm not sure. So, yeah. but in terms of the officials talking to the press, I understand what he's saying about directly after the game and them saying, I didn't see the play, I didn't see the play. You can have a designated official, right, that after the evening's games, their job is to go back, look at the plays, and be prepared to answer some questions the following morning from media. It would be so good for the league. It would be something the fans would enjoy. You'd have a lot. I guarantee something like that would encourage people to go to the games more, get more involved with the league, because they would feel like the league actually cared when they wake up Monday morning and they're screaming and yelling about some terrible call that happened on the ice the day before.
And so, whoops, elbowed you in the face. Sorry, ref didn't see it. That was really a big part of the reason why the NHL eventually went to two officials, because players were getting faster, bigger, stronger, and it was getting more and more difficult to police the league. And so, in a league where people say, oh, the league should police itself. No, you get 322 penalty minutes in a game when the league decides to police itself. That is a failure of Department of Player Safety. That is absolutely a failure of Department of Player Safety. Now, I wanted to mention a few comments because I find them odd. First off, the league's too soft. I see this a lot, and yet the one team that seems to play old-style hockey, Florida Panthers being one that absolutely can, and people get mad at them. They're not a soft team, so I guess there's that in between there, but generally the players that are very physical, the players that throw a lot of hits, the players who drop the gloves, they're going to throw more violent hits. They're not going to be scared of a guy getting mad and dropping the gloves after. They might hit a little bit harder than the other guys do. I miss the good old days is one that I see too. They take care of this in the good old days. Yeah, during the bench clearing brawls, guys having their careers ended by hits to the head at center ice. Good times. No. There was always the idea that the skill players were protected by the enforcer, but I seem to remember Mario Lemieux retiring because there wasn't protection for him at one point. He would come back into the league, but that was a complaint of his. And he played through that era where the enforcer, makes sure that the star player is okay and there's no concern. So there's always going to be those dirty plays because the enforcer that people want back, the enforcers were usually the ones throwing the hits, the plays, the stick swinging. The guys who get 20-plus game suspensions were very often the enforcers. And who's going to enforce the enforcers? It's who's going to watch the watchmen. It's all over again, right? So I don't think bringing back enforcers. The other problem is nobody's an enforcer as a kid. Nobody's an enforcer in juniors now. So where do the enforcers come from? You'd have to train these pros to be enforcers, but coaches like to have 12 forwards that can play. They like to have 6 defensemen that can play.
The league is too fast and too skilled now to have guys that can't really skate and don't add anything to your game to have in there. That was definitely a different time. Those guys were fun to watch. I got Peter Worrell's stick signed up here. Paul Law is one of my favorite players. They had some skills too, but the George Parises of the world, those days, they're gone.
To have guys who can take regular shifts. There will not be a return of enforcers, and considering how violent the NHL was during that, the time of the enforcer, which started in the 70s. I mean, I guess there was some 60s definitely had that as well. John Ferguson, Eddie Shack. My parents told me stories. But yeah, so the other one that I get a kick out of is, and I see this complaint at times, players don't hate each other anymore. They're always smiling. They're always smiling at each other. They're always talking across on the face. What happened to when they hate each other? This is what happens when they hate each other. This is what happens when the players detest one another.
Thank you. I just said that a half hour ago. Exactly. Full circle. Thank you, Shannon. Great minds think alike. Exactly. This is what happens. Those guys hate each other.
Plays where maybe they're not taking the other player's safety into account. I can throw this. I'm going to throw this. It's going to happen. It's going to be a great hit. I might get suspended. I might not. So the hate that people want in the game, the old style hockey people want in the game, I don't think they do, because they complain constantly about these plays that by 20 years ago, by those standards, wouldn't have been considered all that difficult to deal with. Wouldn't have been considered suspension worthy for sure. So those are the comments I wanted to throw out there. And when you do what, in the case of Tampa, what they did Tampa win that game? No. Did Tampa in that game learn anything about their team? Not really. So what happened was they threw away that last exhibition game to try to get back at Florida for what happened in the previous game. And coming out of that game, it doesn't appear that Florida has any long-term injuries, but Tampa may. So that's where it gets tricky for me, is I don't think that for when people say, well, I think everybody should play against Tampa like that, or everybody should play against Florida like that, like Tampa did.
I'll let him finish here in a minute, but the way to exact revenge, and I don't like this, but this is the truth, and I've said it before, against Vegas, Tkachuk goes and levels Eichel, right? Oh, I mean, the dude had the surgery. He's not, you know what I mean? Tkachuk just laid him out. Eichel gets up, skates off. It's all fine. Next game, couple games later, whichever it was, Kolazar breaks Tkachuk's sternum. Two clean hits, okay? And that's generally how this retribution stuff goes. It's just generally how it should work. You know what I'm saying? Not calling up 6 guys from the minors. Of course, they'd never do that in the regular season, but
I don't think that hurts Florida, but I think it'll hurt other teams. I think if we get to the point where the league's like, we're all going to go out and beat up the Florida Panthers, good luck. This is a team that's played a lot of hockey over the last 3 years. I think it's 319 games over the last 3 seasons. It's a ridiculous amount of games. It's the most games any team's played over 3 seasons. They're going to wear down. It's going to happen. It is very, very difficult to continually put up with over 100 games a year and still have more energy than the other teams you're against. So at some point, they're going to lose. It could very well be this season. There's definitely a lot of talk about dynasty. There's definitely pressure there. So I do look forward to the day when somebody else is going to be the most hated team. Somebody else is going to be the dirtiest team. It is probably going to be the next Stanley Cup champion, whoever that's going to be. It could be Vegas again. Maybe Tampa goes on a run. They get that reputation. Because that's how it works in the National Hockey League. That's how it's always worked in the National Hockey League. I've seen the comments over the last couple weeks because I do scour the internet trying to see what people are saying, even on Reddit, for instance. And it generally seems to be that the NHL's got it in for certain teams. They favor certain teams, but the teams they favor seem to change over the years, and there doesn't seem to be a rhyme nor reason for it. Although the Gregory Campbell one is a convenient one for Florida, as if they weren't President's Trophy winners before that, as if they hadn't gone to the Stanley Cup final before he was the AGM. But hey, it's out there. It's an easy one, right? Because
Barkov and Ekblad and Lundell and brought in Bobrovsky and Bennett and Reinhardt and Verhage and Luster. I mean, right. Oh, yeah, it was in Forsling. It was all Campbell.
It appeals to that idea that people in upper management are corrupt, and it's an easy message to sell people on. Very, very easy one to sell people on. And it means that when your team loses in the playoffs against them, you can say, well, of course, they never had a chance because Colin Campbell is still an executive in the National Hockey League. So that way you don't have to address anything that happened in the series. You can just go, that's what happened. That's what did it. And yeah, I can't do that. As I've said before, I'll say it again here one last time. If I believe that, I wouldn't be running a hockey channel. I wouldn't be the hockey guy. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, well done. Well, I knew it was going to be good. I knew I could count on Shannon to do well with that. So the only thing I'll say that I agree with him on is the automatic suspensions. I could talk about it. Like I could be talked to about it. You know what I mean? Like what are we talking about? Are we talking about two-handed overhead chops, right? But if it's 5 in the game on automatic suspension, they already review those anyway for that. So I don't see where an automatic suspension is going to change anything because if it's an automatic, I mean, they're not going to make it, unsuspendable. I don't think you can, or unappealable, right? I don't think you can have a judgment call in the middle of a game, give somebody 5 in the game, and have that judgment call in the middle, full speed, be what leads to automatic suspension. I think that leaves too much to chance. But I could at least I'd hear what he has to say anyway. So all right, that's almost an hour. Good video from Shannon. I love the hockey guy, as we all do. All right, that's going to do it. I'm going to get this up and out to you all. And then Panthers play Ottawa tonight at 7 o'clock. The members only stream. I do a half-hour members only stream before each Panther game. That'll be at 6:30. And then Colin and I will be live to stream the game at 7. The recap will be up at 11. And beat just keeps on rolling. And then we get to watch my Dolphins get crushed tomorrow on the football channel.